Business Skills 360, the podcast that looks at the other side of business English. Hello, and welcome back to the Skills 360 podcast. I'm your host, Tim Simmons, and today I want to talk about how to get the most out of a conference. The digital age has changed the way we communicate and build relationships. And while it's great to be able to connect with someone on the other side of the world by email, phone, or chat apps, face-to-face contact is certainly not dead. In fact, in this hyper-connected world, face-to-face contact is even more valuable, and one of the best opportunities for FaceTime is at a conference. Getting the most out of a conference begins before the conference, when you plan your trip. In many cases, you'll have the option to stay at the conference venue. If so, it's worth it, and if not, then stay as close as possible. You don't want to miss out on any action because you're spending time getting to and from the conference. And there's lots of informal networking opportunities that can happen spontaneously around the conference location. You want to be able to capitalize on those opportunities as much as possible. Conference preparation also means having an early look at the agenda or lineup of talks and deciding which ones you want to attend. You might choose based on the topic or because you want to meet the presenter. But don't pack your schedule. Leave some time open for a tete-a-tete with a prospect or a potential partner. Now, you've probably seen people at conferences ducking out of presentations to take phone calls or madly sending emails during breaks. Don't let that be you. If at all possible, carve time out of your schedule to be truly present at the conference. Let colleagues know you'll be busy so they don't inundate you with email. You've probably also seen people racing around trying to locate a phone charger or apologizing because they don't have any business cards on them. These are definitely things to avoid. Come prepared. Make sure you have all the tech and business cards you might need. So, imagine you've done all you should to prepare, and you show up on the first day at the registration table. You get your name tag and your conference package, and now what? Well, I'd like to share some do's with you today, and in our next lesson, I'll go over some important don'ts. What kind of do's am I talking about? Well, my number one suggestion is to get out and meet people. If all you want is information or learning, then you can do that online or in a class. A conference is one of the absolute best networking opportunities around. So don't be shy. Be the first to break the ice. Be the first to break the ice. Other people will appreciate it. That conference room is full of potential customers and collaborators. Go find them. Be personable. And in every conversation, try to establish a personal connection or something in common. That might mean a place, an interest, a mutual acquaintance, or an opinion on one of the speakers. Speaking of speakers, it's a great idea to use the topics of their talk or workshop as a starting point for a conversation. And one thing you should do that will help you absorb and process what you learn is to take notes. Don't assume you'll remember everything you hear. Taking notes will also help you ask good questions at the end of a talk or presentation. That's one way you can stand out, make an impression on people, and build a connection with the presenter. Asking questions is part of a more general bit of advice. Participate. That doesn't just mean in workshops or sessions. You should also be engaged via social media by posting on the event's website as well as your own. It also means getting involved in social activities after hours. A lot of great business is conducted and relationships built at the pub. But let me give you one don't in advance of our next lesson. Don't overdo it at the pub, especially early in the conference. If you have so much fun that you miss half the next day, you're wasting an opportunity. Okay, I've talked about the importance of good preparation, staying close to the action, and making sure you have everything you need so you're not scrambling during the event. I've also given you some advice for during the event, especially around networking, taking notes, and participating in everything the conference has to offer. Tune in next time, and I'll cover some things to avoid and talk about some important conference follow-up activities. That's all for today. If you'd like to test yourself on what we've just covered, have a look at the businessenglishpod.com website. There, you'll find a quiz about today's show, as well as a complete transcript. So long, and see you again soon. Business Skills 360, the podcast that looks at the other side of business English. Hello, and welcome back to the Skills 360 podcast. I'm your host, Tim Simmons, and today I want to give you some more tips for getting the most out of a conference. Some people see conferences as a way to get away from the office for a few days and take a break. And sure, it's helpful to step back from the daily grind and learn something, or reflect on your work and business. But if you really want to get the most out of a conference, you should look at it as more than just a learning opportunity. I mean, if you've got hundreds or even thousands of people in one place looking to connect with others, it's a golden opportunity for networking. In our last lesson, I talked about conference preparation and gave you a list of things you should do during the conference. Today, I want to give you some tips for after the conference and share some don'ts or things to avoid during the conference. My first tip is to not attend every session. Don't feel like you're missing out if you linger in the lobby or the hallways while others are in a workshop. Some of the best conversations happen outside the meeting rooms when you've got some space and quiet time for really good discussion. And this ties in with another thing to avoid: rushing. Anytime you're in a hurry, you're closed to networking. So if you're having a great conversation with a potential customer and you realize the presentation on soft selling is about to start, don't dash off. Skip the presentation and focus on the opportunity at hand. Now, I realize that conferences can be intimidating. We've all had that experience of walking into lunch on the first day and scanning the crowd for someone we know, like a colleague or coworker. someone safe and familiar. But safe and familiar is why we go home at night, not why we attend conferences. So don't glom onto one person or your colleagues. That's a waste. You need to spread yourself around. So, at lunchtime, don't look for familiar people, and don't park yourself with a fellow wallflower. Instead, look for interesting, outgoing, or influential people. Ask them if you can join them, and get involved in the conversation. After all, getting involved is what it's all about. You need to appear open for business, so to speak. And to do that, there are a couple of other things you should avoid. For one, don't spend too much time on your phone checking email or calling the office to see if the photocopier has been fixed yet. That's not why you're there. I realize it's tempting to pull out your mobile anytime you have a spare minute. But here's a challenge for you. Every time you want to look at your phone, talk to someone new instead. This is not to say that your phone is useless. In fact, I'm about to tell you how you should use it. But first, here's another don't. Don't focus too much on business cards. I know that sometimes you judge your networking success by how many cards you got. But quality is more important than quantity. Besides, you can easily lose business cards. And then what do you have besides the memory of a face? So if you've made a good connection, ask instead for the person's mobile number or email and plug it directly into your phone. You might be thinking that you like to be able to write notes on the back of business cards. But did you realize that there's space for notes in your phone contacts? Those notes will come in handy later, after the conference, right? There's no use getting someone's contact info if you never contact them. So, a few days after the event, you should follow up with those people you talked to. Some people like to email everyone the first day after the conference. But right after a conference, there's usually a lot of different things competing for your time and attention. So, it's more effective to wait a few days before following up. What else should you do once a conference has finished? Well, if you've taken lots of notes, it's a good idea to organize them or type them up. Reflect on what you learned rather than getting swallowed back up by the daily grind right away. At a conference, you might be so overwhelmed by information that you can't absorb it all. So taking time afterward to review and reflect is an important part of getting the most out of your conference. And don't think only of the benefits to yourself. It's a great idea to pass on what you learned to your colleagues. Organize a little workshop or presentation on your key takeaways. Use the ideas you encountered to generate discussion at your office. All right, we've covered some important conference tips today. I've advised you against a few things like attending every session, rushing between talks, sticking to familiar people, and spending too much time on your phone. These are all things that can get in the way of networking. And after the conference, be sure to follow up with people and organize or share everything you learned. That's all for today. If you'd like to test yourself on what we've just covered, have a look at the businessenglishpod.com website. There, you'll find a quiz about today's show, as well as a complete transcript. So long, and see you again soon. Business Skills 360, the podcast that looks at the other side of business English. Hello, and welcome back to the Skills 360 podcast. I'm your host, Tim Simmons, and today I want to talk about managing virtual teams. The COVID-19 pandemic has transformed how and where we work. When the pandemic hit, many white-collar workplaces went virtual, and more people than ever found themselves working from home. Now, as most countries move into the end game and lift restrictions, companies are faced with the choice about whether and how to head back to the office. Many are choosing not to return to in-person operations or taking a hybrid approach, combining remote and in-person work. Clearly, remote work in some form is here to stay. And as a manager, you shouldn't be thinking about the virtual team as purely a stopgap measure. You need to consider ongoing management of virtual teams. And you need to figure out approaches that will ensure not only productivity and effectiveness, but also employee wellness and job satisfaction. Start by remembering that people deal differently with remote work. While some people thrive in the home office, others might feel isolated. So this may mean a highly individualized approach to management is required. Regardless of your employees' feelings about remote work, good relationships are critical. Some say that a workplace culture isn't about a shared office, but rather a shared vision. But connecting people to that vision and to each other can be tough in a virtual setting. In person, we develop a feeling of being a group through shared space, informal encounters, impromptu lunches, and the like. But on a virtual team, none of that exists. For this reason, we need to build connection time a bit more deliberately. Meetings become critical. Regularly scheduled team meetings will help people feel more connected and informed. And team meetings will give you a gauge of how people are feeling overall and how they're functioning as a unit. But team meetings don't have to be all business all the time. Without the organic opportunities for getting to know one another in a physical office, we need to create those opportunities. This may mean opening the virtual meeting room a bit early to allow time for some chit-chat. Or you could do some fun icebreakers or have a round of personal sharing. Some companies have virtual happy hours or open a come-and-go water cooler meeting at lunch. Another thing to consider are ground rules for video use. While some people may resist having their video on at all times, it's difficult to build a relationship with someone you can't see. So requiring cameras on at certain times during a meeting or for certain meetings is wise. And even if your team normally works virtually, consider bringing them together in person from time to time. Some work functions, like planning or professional development, really benefit from being in a room together. When you're in a room together, communication is simply easier. We have body language and other visual cues, and as a manager, you can get a much better sense of how people are doing, both as individuals and in their relationships with others. But virtual communication? Well, that's certainly more complicated. One thing you'll find with a virtual team is that people may have very different communication preferences. Jane hates the phone and likes everything in email. Jack gets frustrated by too much email and wants to talk things through over Zoom. Jill hates the phone and email and deals with everything through texting. In these situations, you'll need to find the right balance between standards and flexibility. There may be certain issues you want people to put in email for the entire team, but you may also want to create some guardrails and establish rules about things like reply all to avoid communication overload. At the same time, you need to acknowledge and allow for individual differences. It's a good idea to have people identify their preferred modes of communication and provide that information to everyone on the team. I might learn over time, for example, that Jane hates the phone. But wouldn't it be easier just to have everyone's preferences stated clearly up front? Adapting to different people's communication preferences is just one of many requirements of the modern manager. On a virtual team, there are many more opportunities for misunderstanding, miscommunication, and misalignment. So as a manager, you need to do all that you can to ensure good relationships through effective meetings and communication. That's all for today. If you'd like to test yourself on what we've just covered, have a look at the businessenglishpod.com website. There you'll find a quiz about today's lesson, as well as a complete transcript. So long, and see you again soon. Business Skills 360, the podcast that looks at the other side of business English. Hello, and welcome back to the Skills 360 podcast. I'm your host, Tim Simmons, and today I want to discuss how to manage virtual teams. Before the COVID-19 pandemic, there were a lot of doubts about whether people could be truly productive working from home. Well, guess what we discovered when workplaces went virtual? People are not just as productive while working remotely. Many are more productive. With no travel time, back-to-back meetings, and less time at the water cooler, many people get more done working from home. That doesn't mean we never have to worry about accountability for remote workers, but measures to ensure accountability have to be counterbalanced by systems that allow workers some autonomy and control over their workflow. Post-pandemic, many workers are simply unwilling to return to a rigid style of management. So, we need to find the sweet spot between structure and flexibility. And we need to support that balance with the right technology and systems. In our last lesson, I underlined the importance of good communication and meetings for virtual teams, and that requires the right tools. Popular video conferencing software includes Zoom, MS Teams, and WebEx. Make sure you explore the pros and cons of these platforms and consider the features you truly need. A lot of companies made a quick pivot early in the pandemic to a particular platform without too much deliberation. If that's the case, it may be time to reconsider and take a more analytical approach. Even if you stick with what you've been using, have a close look at how you're using it. Many teams established norms and conventions very quickly, but never evaluated their effectiveness. Besides video conferencing, many teams rely on communication software like Slack, project management software like Basecamp or Asana, and CRMs like Salesforce or HubSpot. The right tools can really up your virtual collaboration game. The wrong tools can be a major obstacle to productivity, not to mention a pain in the neck for employees. To choose the right tools, start by assessing your own needs and talking to your employees about their preferences. Then look for the platform or suite of tools that matches those needs and preferences. Many companies resist switching tools because of the sunk costs and the fundamental challenges of change management. But if they're the wrong tools, then you're just throwing good money after bad. And the opportunity cost, in terms of improved productivity, far outweighs the sunk costs over anything beyond the short term. Organizing your virtual workspace depends not just on technologies, but also on systems and processes. This is where the balance between autonomy and standardization is key. When it comes to scheduling, you probably don't need everyone at their desk every day from 9 to 5. Consider allowing people some discretion in setting the hours they work, particularly as they may be working around domestic schedules. But you do want people's work hours to overlap so they can collaborate, solve problems, and get information from each other quickly. As for process, it's very important to be clear on standard operating procedures. In the virtual workplace, it's harder for people to get quick answers, so clarify tasks and processes, not just goals and roles. A good system of processes and procedures will reduce the need for oversight and help employees when they're missing the continual daily feedback and input that is easy to get in the physical office. When you go about designing policies and processes, be sure to consider equity and fairness. Many companies are rushing to implement new hybrid work models or operating procedures without understanding how different employees may be impacted differently. People can become very resentful if they feel they're disadvantaged or inconvenienced compared to others. And in this day and age, when competition for talent is so fierce, you can't afford that resentment. One final thing I can't emphasize enough when it comes to platforms and systems for virtual teams is training. Throwing a new project management tool at your team without the right support is not going to improve productivity. And remember that different people need different degrees of training and support. And that training and support shouldn't be a one-time affair. It's an ongoing endeavor. Without a doubt, virtual teams are here to stay. And we've looked at many ways to ensure the success of your virtual team as a manager. To support good relationships and effective collaboration, you need effective communication and great meetings. To support all these things, you need the right technology and systems. And remember that the right balance between structure and flexibility can ensure productivity, effectiveness, and job satisfaction. That's all for today. If you'd like to test yourself on what we've just covered, have a look at the businessenglishpod.com website. There you'll find a quiz about today's lesson, as well as a complete transcript. So long, and see you again soon.